Hello, welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. My name is Johan and I'm a Dutchie. And I react to videos about life and living in Australia because I can't get there. It's way down there. There's a small pocket of water in between, but yeah, I'm afraid of flying. So I do my research and my learning by watching YouTube videos about life and living in Australia. So if you want to learn along with me, then feel free to hit the subscribe button and learn together with me about life and living in Australia. And for today, we're gonna take a look at some history from the Dutch and Australia, and it's called The Wreck of Batavia, Dutch Nightmare in Australia. So I know, of course, after Batavia, it's part of the VOC companies. VOC is my own history, so I know. But the nightmare in Australia, I'm not sure. But let's take a look at this video. Here we go.
29, a mighty ship from the VOC, the Dutch East India Company, struck a coral reef off the coast of
Checking if the volume is a bit right. I think it's a bit louder.
Australia. Hundreds of people were stranded, but it was only afterwards that the real nightmare began. Within weeks, survivors began turning on each other, and by the time that help arrived, dozens had been murdered. The Batavia was no ordinary ship. She was a state-of-the-art East Indiaman built to ferry spices, troops and colonists across half the world. In October 1628, she set sail from the Netherlands on her maiden voyage bound for Java, part of the growing Dutch presence in the Indies. On board were over 300 people, sailors, soldiers, merchants and their families. These voyages were long, hot and dangerous.
These pictures from the night watch, etc., they don't belong to this video, but okay.
People died of diseases like scurvy or were flushed overboard during storms. Only the most adventurous or the most desperate gambled everything for a better life on the other side of the world. Among them was a man who would change everything, a disgraced apothecary named Hieronymus Cornelis. The Dutch had charted much of the Australian coastline and perhaps were considering setting up trading posts or even colonies there in the future, but they never.
If you look at this old map, because this is Java, I'm not sure because we got Sumatra way up there, but this distance look almost nothing. But yeah, wow. Wait a minute, Hossandia? Nova. Yeah, I don't think it's, but it's not New Holland, what it used to be. So it's not even Old Dutch language because it says Hossandia. It's not even clear. Nova could be Nova Hossandia, but yeah.
Never did. And some say this is why. Like most VOC ships, the Batavia had been following the Brouwer route, a fast but risky shortcut used by Dutch East India Company ships.
The narrator is Dutch, I can hear.
It involved sailing around the Cape of Good Hope before sailing across the open Indian Ocean due east. There, the roaring 40s acted like a motorway in the age of sail, bringing Dutch ships to the Indies in half the time as sailing around India would. The last leg of the journey was to turn northeast towards Batavia in the Indies, today's Jakarta, and it's here that things started to go wrong for the Batavia ship. On the 4th of June 1629, the Batavia veered off course and slammed into a coral reef in the Houtman Abrolhos, a chain of small, barren islands off Western Australia. The ship was destroyed. Survivors scrambled onto the islands, but food and water were scarce. The commander, Francisco Belsart, took a small boat and set off with a handful of men to fetch help, leaving over 250 people.
To where? To fetch help? From where? You don't know where you are? You had shipwrecked? How do you know where you're going to?
People behind, including many women and children. And that's when Hieronymus Cornelis made his move. But the wrecking of the Batavia hadn't been some freak accident. Belsart was an experienced merchant and made this journey many times before. Despite his experience, he had little standing in the eyes of the Batavia's skipper, his second-in-command, Adriaan Jacobzoon. The two had history, with Belsart publicly dressing Jacobzoon down for drunken and disorderly behaviour in the past. And now Jacobzoon wanted to get his own back. Recruiting a band of cronies, including the former apothecary Cornelis, Jacobzoon steered the ship off course, planning to steal the ship's
on purpose. Okay. I didn't know that.
Supplies and riches to start a new life elsewhere. To instigate a mutiny, he and his gang...
Yeah, because he wasn't that much beloved in the Dutch. So, yeah. That's what I know. But I didn't know that he's planning to become a pirate. Not of the Caribbean.
targeted the 27-year-old Lucretia Jans. She was travelling to join her husband in the Indies. The mutineers hoped that by assaulting her, they would draw out a harsh response from Belsart and win more of the crew to their side. This ultimately failed though, when the young woman was unable to identify her abusers. But not long afterwards, the Batavia struck the reef, and a new opportunity presented itself. With Belsart and Jacobzoon gone, Cornelis was left in charge. But he wasn't interested in survival, he wanted power. He ordered a group of soldiers led by Wibbehaes to search nearby West Wallaby Island for fresh water, then abandoned them without a boat. They had left their muskets behind with the survivors to protect the women and children, a decision that would return to haunt them. With the armed opposition gone, Cornelis established his own personal bodyguard and began a reign of terror. Some accounts claim he wanted to establish a pirate kingdom for himself, ready to commandeer any rescue vessels for his own uses.
In a pirate ship in pirate waters in a pirate world.
Though he never did any of the killing himself, Cornelis had his cronies murder anyone who stood in his way on trumped-up charges of theft. In total, over 100 people were killed, often brutally. Women were enslaved and abused. Lucretia Jans was turned into Cornelis' personal slave. Children were drowned in the ocean. Some survivors...
If you want to build an empire, you need kids.
managed to escape to nearby islands, holding out in hope of rescue. It was one of the darkest episodes of maritime Dutch history, and all of it happened on the shores of a land they might have called home. Meanwhile, Hayes and the soldiers had managed to find fresh water, a supply of food, and had even constructed a small fort from limestone and coral blocks. Unaware of what was happening on the neighbouring...
A small fort. Where do we... Yeah, so where do you need a fort for? But as protection against the originals, the aboriginals to be precise.
Island, they sent the prearranged smoke signals which Cornelis had always intended to ignore. Sensing something was wrong, survivors who managed to swim to West Wallaby Island painted pictures of the nightmare unfolding on the
Swim? So it's swimmable?
other side of the water. But with a pile of corpses and the terrified survivors desperate to escape, Cornelis and his mutineers had painted themselves into a corner. With water fast running out, they crossed over to West Wallaby Island and tried to take it by force. But the soldiers were better fed and they were able to beat off Cornelis' men with weapons made from the Batavia's salvaged planks and nails. Clearly convinced with his own abilities, Cornelis offered a parley to try and persuade the soldiers to join him. But Hayes...
O je helemaal lekker, jongen. Are you still normal, boy?
was having none of it. He seized Cornelis, and everyone hoped that the chaos was over. But it seems the upstart apothecary wasn't the only bad apple in the bunch. His former henchmen regrouped, arming themselves with muskets earlier confiscated from the soldiers, and attacked again in force. Being picked off at long range, all Hayes and his men could do was pray for a miracle. Belsat, in another miracle-worthy feat, had made it to Java and returned aboard the small VOC ship.
So he went all over to Java, way up north, in a small, I guess, small boat.
Sardam to rescue the survivors, entirely unaware of the bloody madness that had ensued in his absence. Just as it seemed Hayes and the soldiers would be overwhelmed, the Sardam's sails bloomed on the horizon. Both Hayes and Cornelis knew that whoever made it to the rescuers first could present their side of the story and paint the other as the instigator, sparking a furious race to the beach. Somehow, Hayes got there first, and the horrified Belsat ordered the ship's cannon to unload on the mutineers. With overwhelming force aboard the Sardam, they surrendered and were imprisoned. Justice was swift. Cornelis and his men were tried on the beach. Several were executed on the spot. Cornelis and the worst offenders had their hands cut off before being hanged. Others were taken back to Batavia for further, often brutal executions. 2 lesser mutineers were marooned on the Australian mainland, the first known Europeans to live there permanently centuries before British colonisation. We ultimately don't know what became of them, and there are few happy endings in this story. While Cornelis got his just deserts, Jakobsson refused to confess and was not executed on the basis of a lack of evidence. His eventual fate is also unknown. Captain Belsat, despite his heroic rescue attempt, was deemed partially responsible because of what was seen as weak leadership and lost all of his financial assets. He died a year later of disease, but not before writing a detailed account of the Batavia's wreck and its aftermath. Lucrezia Jans, undoubtedly traumatized by all she had endured, lived longer than Belsat. She arrived in Batavia to the news that her husband, who she was journeying to meet, had died a year earlier. To make matters worse, she found herself under investigation for her role in the Batavia's demise. The court even wanted permission to torture her as part of the inquest.
Yeah. The VOC. We weren't that great in those days. We were very bad.
As she denied the allegations made against her, but it's unclear.
Schip Batavia. Een ongelukkige voyagee. An unfortunately voyage. So a voyage as a voyagee. De schip Batavia naar Oost-Indian, East India, but in Old Dutch. Uitgevaren onder E. François Pelvier. Gebleven op de Abroniusbaan. Frederik Houtman op de hoogte van 28 about. Nice to see Old Dutch.
Clear if this request was granted. The number of testimonies accusing her by her fellow survivors was enormous. They accused her of ophitsing, stijving tot boze feiten, incitement, urging to evil deeds, and the killing of the protected and the rescued people, through which some have lost their lives due to her false instigation. Almost certainly this was born out of jealousy and a degree of scapegoating. Unlike the other female survivors who were common property, Jans only had to share Cornelis's bed and perhaps enjoyed certain privileges when
common property is here not a nice word.
It came to food and water. A cauldron of stigma and shame almost certainly surrounded her in Batavia, and when she married a year later, it was to a sergeant who was well beneath her station. They returned together to the Dutch Republic in 1635. She died 6 years later, just shy of her 40th birthday. Unlike the female survivors, the male survivors were hailed as heroes. Wiebe Hayes was promoted to the rank of sergeant on the beach by Belsat, doubling his salary in one fell swoop, while his men were all made corporals. Hayes was promoted again when he reached Batavia to the rank of standard bearer. After that, he disappears entirely from the record.
Of the 303 crew and 38 passengers aboard the Batavia, the month-long stranding off the Australian coast would ultimately claim the lives of
The sound changed of the voiceover.
120. Theories abound as to why Cornelis orchestrated such a merciless campaign of violence when they were stranded. One possibility is that he feared his co-conspirator, Ariaan Jacobsson, might escape blame for their failed mutiny by pinning it all on Cornelis when he was in Batavia. That would have meant preparing to seize any rescue ship before word of their crimes could reach it. What might have started as a cold calculation to eliminate witnesses could have spiraled into unchecked bloodlust. Others look for psychological or medical explanations. Cornelis never personally carried out the killings, he delegated them. This has led some to suggest that he was a manipulative sadist, perhaps even a psychopath, who derived satisfaction from controlling others. There's also speculation that he suffered from neurosyphilis,
All speculations.
a real possibility given that his young son had recently died of the disease before Cornelis departed for the East. Still others point to his radical religious views. Cornelis was more than a disgraced apothecary. He had been a follower of Rosicrucianism, a shadowy esoteric movement blending mysticism, alchemy and reformist ideals. He had even been a friend of Johannes van der Beek, the Dutch Golden Age painter,
Oh. Strange religion. Never heard of it.
known for his own heretical views. Cornelis' decision to join the VOC may have come after van der Beek was arrested and tortured for blasphemy. Now, marooned on an island beyond the reach of Dutch law, Cornelis may have seen an opportunity to build something new, a world with no God, no rules, and no morality, one ruled only by himself.
Could this gruesome event have changed world history?
Again, switch in the voice.
It's hard to say, but the Dutch never attempted to colonize Australia. They mapped it, even named it New Holland, and then moved on. Maybe the harshness of the land discouraged them, or the lack of spices, although maybe
The lack of spices was given as the most prominent reason why we didn't colonize over there, because it was not profitable enough. So
the trauma of the Batavia convinced them it wasn't worth the risk. Whatever the reason, it left the continent open for another empire. The Batavia's wreck lay hidden for centuries, with much speculation as to its final resting place. It was eventually rediscovered in the 1960s, spotted first by lobster fishermen.
yeah, I've seen videos about Batavia and reconstructions of the Batavia. So they rebuild it.
And today its remains and relics are on display in Western Australia. Amazingly, the stone fort built by Hayes and his men can still be seen and visited on West Wallaby Island today.
West Wallaby Island. Okay.
To commemorate the rediscovery, a replica was started in the 1980s and finished in 1995, making several transoceanic voyages before harbouring in Lelystad in the Netherlands, where it sits today. The
Yeah, that's where I went. I've seen it. But I didn't know that the original was in Australia.
story of the Batavia isn't just about a shipwreck. It's about what people do when law, order, and hope vanish. It presents some of the very worst elements of humanity, like Cornelis and his men murdering and abusing survivors of a shipwreck for their own gain. But also some of the very best. The heroism of men like Belshaard in making the journey to the Indies in a rowing boat to go for help, or of
Yeah. To the Indies. I have no clue how far it is from Wallaby Island, in this case, to the Indies, but it's the ocean. It's not like you're crossing a lake. It's crossing the ocean or part of it. So
of Hayes and his men to fight back against tyranny, or Lucrezia Jans to persevere and survive against all the odds in a world turned against her. It's about how thin the line is between civilization and chaos. And perhaps it's about a moment that changed the course of colonial and certainly Australian history. Was this the disaster that stopped the Dutch from claiming Australia? Let me know what you think.
no, not the skull, but I used this flag combination with Australian flag in an earlier video as a thumbnail. Wow. Yeah, it's all about the history of the VOC, and anyone who dives deeper in the history of the VOC knows that the Oost-Indian Company was a company, so it was not even from the Dutch government. It was a company, and it was a rich company. It belongs to the richest companies in the world at that point, but they were also known for their cruelty. There are absolutely horror stories known from the times that the VOC conquered all those nice countries that we colonized. So, yeah, this is one of those, but also one of the greatest stories about how we know about Australia and how the British eventually used the maps made by the VOC to get connection to Australia, and now the Australians are, of course, there. Wow. Nice video. I want to know about the comments, because this is a mix of Dutch and... So I want to take a look at some comments, what we have over here, and I have to look at... So my uncle actually wrote a book about this event and actually argues that the plan for mutiny never existed. Okay. And then gives another psychological explanation for the violence and the murders. He's really interesting novel. I think he makes a rather good point. It's called the Duivelse Dilemma's. Nou, de Shipwreck van Batavia. I don't think there's an English translation. Oh, it's the Devil's Dilemma after the Shipwreck of the Batavia, and translated in English, but the book itself is not translated. Okay. I remember correctly, the mutineers left to die on the Australian mainland mixed with the local natives. Some research showed they have distant relatives from the Netherlands. So, wait a minute. If I remember correctly, the mutineers left to die on the Australian mainland, mixed with the local natives. Some research shows that they have distant relatives from the Netherlands. So in a way, you could say that the Dutch did, in fact, colonize Australia. Wow. Wow. I still miss a movie about this, a true horror story. It is, yeah. A lot of comments, yeah, wow. Well, again, a bit of history connection between the Netherlands and Australia, although not the best part of our history is being displayed in this video. But good to know, and for my Australian viewers, good to know too. So if you want to see other of my videos, then maybe this is a good place to start with. And otherwise, it would be really appreciated if you hit the subscribe button. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next Australian video.